Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Reads Podcast, the show where I talk about books and only books and everything book related. And today I am joined by Mr. Terrence Rotering. Terrence is graduated from the United States Air Force Academy. He retired from the United States Air Force after 20 years of service as a weapons systems officer on fighter aircraft worldwide and 15 more years as the North American Aerospace Defense Command. He is also the author of the 10-book Chronicles series. He gives readers an epic adventure of fantasy, science fiction, and spiritual warfare, following in the footsteps of the giants in all three genres. So today he's here to share a little bit more about his books and share a little bit about his writing journey. So, Terrence, I appreciate you for taking time to come on the podcast today, and welcome to Southern Reads. I'm excited to have you on today.
Thanks, Noah. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know on my other podcast, Lethal Venom, we kind of talked a lot about the Air Force and what you did for the Air Force and everything, but I feel like we didn't talk a lot about the books at all. So that's what we're going to do for this one. So share with me a little bit about the backstory behind the Chronicle series and what kind of got you started into writing.
Sure. Well, it started about 20 years ago. I wrote a short book, Stand, which was in the first trilogy for my boys to show them that anybody could write a book and have a voice. And then I did a prequel for it 5 years later just to have some more fun and never intended on really writing anymore. I didn't go to school for it, didn't plan on it. And then after my career was over in 2024, I took a look at those again, rewrote the first two, and then added a third one called Forever. So it was the Faithful Stand Forever for that first trilogy. And I just wanted to have kind of feel complete with the trilogy. It seems like the thing to do these days. So it went from very early in the time kind of thing, like swords and battles and stuff like that for the beginning, all the way up to artificial intelligence, aliens, the Alliance fighting the Order, just really futuristic book in forever. And then I thought I was kind of done. But through a series of what I call God winks and other things, I ended up just increasing the size of this universe that I had created with a series of two more trilogies. The Promised Time Redeemed, which was a prequel to The Faithful Stand Forever, so those two. And then I exploded it into seven different dimensions, seven different worlds, if you will, really blowing up the multiverse in the Chronicles of the Seven Wheels. And then I just last week sent yet again what is another trilogy, but it's all within one book. So it's a really big book. You get three in one. And it's called the Chronicles of the Wheelstones, the Tesseract Vortex. And it again really blows up the science fiction aspect of the entire series, changes it all. So you really, when you go back and relook at the earlier books, everything's changed. And then it brings it home to the reader kind of thing. So it's called Unfencing the Fiction. So whereas you're really into the books and you're really into the characters and stuff, and then it ends, like when you go to a movie or you finish reading your favorite book, you're like, oh man, it's over. Well, this thing just keeps going and expanding and everything keeps changing. And then when it brings it home to the reader, instead of leaving the theater or finishing that book 30 minutes later or whatever, that was fun, but it's over. This is all pertinent to your real life. It brings it home to you, shows you're in a battle and you have all the tools to fight, just like you were watching all the characters. So really, Noah, even since I talked to you last time, there's a whole nother expansion to this series. And I'm also well on my way to one more expansion that I'm really excited about because, again, it kind of changes everything again. And it'll come out later this year, the beginning of next year. It's called the Chronicles of the Seven Sons Checkmate. So every time I act or I think I'm going to finish this thing, it just has more legs and just keeps going. And I'm kind of trapped in this multiverse, and I'm really excited, having a good time there.
So when you are writing these books, do you typically have kind of a writing regimen or routine? Do you kind of sit down and write for a few hours and then maybe take a few days off? How do you kind of go about the writing process?
Yeah, it's been crazy, Noah, and it's kind of changed. Obviously, that first trilogy, took 5 years to do the second one, and then 20 years to do the third one, or 15, I guess, somewhere in there. So that was really different than what I've been doing here in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, I've been writing about 10 pages a day, and it's just because I'm so excited about it. And I don't sit down at a computer. I walk the dogs, or I hike, or drive, or whatever, and just taking that little part of that analytical side of the brain away lets the creative side kind of free, and ideas come to me. What I do is I just walk around with my phone. I put the ideas into my phone. A lot of times I'll write a chapter on my phone just by talking into it while I'm doing other things like that, hiking or driving or whatever. And then when I get home, I download that into the computer, fix it up a little bit, and then I let it sit and I write the whole book. And then when I'm done with the book, I go back and I'm kind of excited because I didn't really concentrate on each chapter that much. So it's all kind of new to me and it's all fun. And then I tighten it up again and work it just a little bit as I go through. And then I have a finished book, and it's kind of amazing the way it's happened. I never really planned on being a writer, so because it was always so laborious back in the day with typewriters and whiteout and all that. It was like, no way, why would I ever want to do that? But now with technology, and that's why I would encourage other people to maybe try it if they were interested or they had something to say, a purpose in writing, to give it another shot because it's so much easier now with the technology, not to let AI write it for you, but just to be able to speak into your phone instead of typing away sitting in a room somewhere.
Did you ever expect the series to grow as much as it has?
Not really. No, like I said, the first trilogy, I thought it was done. And then when I expanded it to a second one, I said, okay, we got the prequel and that one, 6 books in this place, pretty neat, all three genres, but I think I'm done. And then when I realized, wait, that place that I wrote all those 6 books for is only one of 7 places. Now all of a sudden I had, wow, a multiverse. So I had all of these other 6 places to go into, talk about them, their characters, their relationship to the first one, and then intertwine and interweave not only the sci-fi and the fantasy and the spiritual warfare all together, kind of seamlessly, really. It worked a lot better than I would have ever thought it would have, but also to tie it to those first 6 books and that first place. So and to realize that in the entire multiverse, there's this humongous battle going on in all of these places with all of the different pieces on the chessboard, um, working for, the main pieces, the kings of the chessboard, which are really Satan and God all the way through history kind of thing here. So, now there's 11 books, going to be 12, and basically 4 trilogies already and going to be a fifth one. And no, I never really planned on it being this big, and it just keeps going.
So, what are some of the God winks that have happened while you've been writing these books?
So after the first 2 books, when I went and said, "Hey, I'll finish this trilogy in 2024," um, I was looking for a place on the map that I needed a name for this island where everything began way back in the beginning. And this is kind of a little dark part here, but the bad guys, they were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon, thinking that was going to get them something. And I was like, okay, I need a name for that place. And I took the first letter of all of the other places on the map as I introduced them originally in 2005, 2010, and then in 2024 with a new place. And it is spelled out Tophet. And I said, well, that kind of has a ring to it. It's kind of cool. I'll put it down. And then a couple days later, I looked it up. And to my amazement, Google said something like, hey, this is a place in ancient Israel in the Valley of Hinnom where a sect of Israelites were sacrificing their children over a fire to a demon called Molech. And that just blew me away because A, I never planned on doing a trilogy. B, I'd introduced these different places, just pulling these names out of my ear, like Heath, that's where I used to fly jets, and, Trinian, what's that? Nomentia, just randomly over the years. And so how could the first letter of those places actually end up spelling what actually was in the book that I had just written? um, Blew me away. So there was that. And then also I have a problem with sleeping. So I think it's partly because of this. I'm so excited about writing so much every day that when I wake up, I just can't go back to sleep. I kind of get to it. So I wake up and I take a picture of my clock radio at 3:16. Just started doing that because I'd wake up a lot at 3:16, and I put John in front of it and post it on Facebook because I'm a big believer in, God sent his son to save us, and that's what John 3:16 in the Bible says. And so I started doing that for years, and then all these 3:16 things started happening with the books. The stand came out, it had 316 pages after the editor went through it. It cost me $2,316 that they gave me for a gold coin at that specific moment, that they were going to give me money for it, that I used to finance that earlier book. The first review, that was the lady's 316th review. I was putting all the money towards a church we were building east of Colorado Springs, everything that I made from it. And through a bunch of delays, the church ended opening up on March 16th, which is 316. So there was just a ton of these things, Noah, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And so that kind of just inspired me to keep going with this because in the story, the spiritual warfare aspect of it, is glorifying God in this big battle against Satan and darkness. So I was like, well, maybe he's just inspiring me to keep going, or maybe I'm just paying attention. And then I got to tell you this, Noah, it just continued for the last 2 years, all the way up to this last book. I wrote it all, and a big part of this, the spiritual part of it, is the fruit of the Spirit and the gift of God in giving us these weapons that we have to fight in this battle against darkness. And so at the first trilogies, I had one of my first granddaughter, Emma, as a big part of it. And I just, I always elevate all the people in my life that I know and love, all my friends and family as different character names in the books as you go through. It's not really them, but it's just their name just to kind of immortalize them, if you will, or honor them. And so I had to write this last book just because I was having a second granddaughter and I didn't want to leave her out someday. I didn't want the first granddaughter to go, hey, I was in the books. How come you didn't put my sister in? So I didn't know her name though. They didn't want to tell us until after she was born. So amazingly, when do you think she was born? I'm going to pop this back at you, Noah. Make it a conversation. Take just a wild guess on what day she was born of the year.
I would assume that she probably was born Christmas Day.
Oh, nope. That was a great guess, but March 16th, again, another 316. So I was like, what? And then when they named her, they gave her middle name, they called her Thea. And so Thea, I was like, well, what does that mean? So I looked it up. Guess what it means? Gift of God or gifts of God. So the name that I then put into the book as one of the main characters is exactly better than anything I could have ever even imagined, but it fits perfectly. And so the 316s, that. And then there was one other thing that's called the Ketuvim. I was looking for a group of people in the books. I already had their names, and I had the first letter of their names, Ketuvim, not in that order. And I put it in Google, and I said, I need a word for this group of people because I was trying to find out, well, what can I call them in the book series? And so it went through and it said, well, there's only 4 words that have those letters end in Vim, which I, accidentally said VIM. And so it thought it had it end in Vim, but it looked it up and said 4 words in the English language. 3 of them were from the ancient Torah, the Israeli writings, the texts. And one of them has Job in it, and it means writings, but it's got Job in the 10 books, and it's called the Ketuvim. And that fit perfectly because there's only 2 verses really that are big in the Bible in this series from the Bible. One of them is John 3:16, and the other one is Job 19:25 through 27. So it having Job in it was another amazing thing, and only 4 words that have these letters. So, it's kind of hard to explain. All this stuff is in the back of the books. I add all of this on, and the different blogs that I've written, and I include it in the back of the book so that people get more of a feel for the stories and where they came from and what they mean to me. And really, it's part of the unfencing of that fiction because these different things are tied right into the books, and they're just kind of amazing stories. So I have flying stories in there and these stories in there and lots of stories of life also included in the back of the books that tell this story. So kind of wandered a little bit there off of your question, I think, but generally those God winks have just been really inspiring my creativity for this book series, I guess I would say.
Since your book kind of dives into the fantasy science fiction world, there's so many authors in this field that have really very interesting things like Harry Potter, I know is one, and a lot of these dystopian. How would you say your books compared to the giants and the genres like that are similar that have a field in fantasy and science fiction?
Yeah, so I think this series, as far as I know, really differs. One, the most obvious thing is it's humongous. So even when you compare it to probably everything with the Harry Potter series, it kind of beats them, I guess, if you will. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything, but it's longer. It's bigger than, the Lord of the Rings with Tolkien. It's bigger than anything Decker or even C.S. Lewis did. So in that way, it's kind of neat because if you get into it, you got a lot of legs. You can just keep reading and learning. And like I said, each trilogy keeps expanding. So that's one thing. The expansion aspect that I touched on there is another thing. It just keeps changing. So, when you read the second trilogy, the third trilogy, the first expansion, and then the second one I'm working on, everything that you've read before kind of changes or your understanding of it. So you get to enjoy it the first time, and then you get to enjoy it again because it's all new with your new understanding of what's really happening behind the scenes. Then, each trilogy is different. Each book really is different. So there's a massive change because I have so much I can do with the fantasy, the spiritual warfare, and the science fiction that there's really no limit to where I can go. So it's always changing and exciting that way. Um, it seamlessly weaves all three of those genres together, which you really wouldn't have thought could happen. But I do it through, kind of anchoring it in quantum mechanics, and space exploration and such with the sci-fi aspect of it. So I make it work where it's not just like I pulled this out of my ear and you just have to accept it. I make everything work with our understanding of science, and with, even the science fiction part of it with uh, black holes and tesseracts and all of these things. So it's neat that way, but it's also cool because, like C.S. Lewis was kind of written, the Narnia stuff for kids, his other stuff for, older people, that really understood a lot of things. Well, this is kind of good for everybody because you can enjoy all of the spirit or the fantasy and sci-fi aspects to it if you're younger, 14, 15 and up. And then if you're a scientist and a nuclear physicist, you can enjoy all of the time travel aspects to it and the quantum physics and all of that. So, everybody can get something from it. Everybody can enjoy it. That egg within an egg, the constantly expansion, the unfencing of the fiction, I think is huge because we kind of touched on that. But, like with Harry Potter, you got to have a wand, to do your magic. And with, Lord of the Rings with Toto or Frodo, you got not Toto because that's a different story, right? But
Yeah.
Frodo, he's got the ring he's got to get rid of and stuff. Here you have these stones, which I'm not going to give too much away, but we all have them. And so when you leave this story, which maybe will never end as long as I'm alive, I might just keep writing it. You actually have the tools to fight in this real world battle that's happening. So when you learn things from different characters and what they went through fighting in this war, you can actually use that in your real life, as opposed to, well, I'm not living in, Middle Earth, or I don't have a wand or whatever. So, and then the biggest thing, Noah, and this is maybe was going to be your last question, and we'll touch it again if it was, but the biggest thing that it differs with is a lot of these stories, even though they say they don't have a spiritual aspect to it, they really do. They're teaching you mysticism or occult, magic, Eastern, like I said, mysticism with the wheels of time or whatever. All the stuff that's out there right now, humanism, nihilism, it's got a lot of chaos, despair. It leaves you with questions. It says God is bad or God is dead or there is no God. All of those things. So this one, unlike those, it's hopeful, it's encouraging. It tells you you're unique, you're special, you have a purpose. God isn't dead, God is real. There's things going on all around you in the spiritual world, angels and demons and stuff fighting for you, and there are answers. So this is completely different than most of the stuff that's out there in all of those different ways. Um, and then the last thing I would say is the language is written, it's not linguistically a barrier for younger people who don't, you don't have to dive into your dictionary and what does that word mean? What does that word mean? Which a lot of the sci-fi or the greats of the genres have written because and I have a purpose in writing this. I want to get a message to people. I want them to enjoy it. I don't want it to be laborious where, I've spent 10 years writing it to make, impress somebody with all the biggest words. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it, A, for everybody to enjoy, but also to have that purpose that I've talked about.
Do you plan on making any of these books in the series that you've written into maybe a screenplay, or have you had anyone reach out to you of interest of turning your book into a TV show or movie or anything like that?
I would love to do that. I got this Gemini. It has a search box which allows you to create gems. So I was able to put all the books that I have in and make a gem out of it. And that is really cool because, not using AI to write or anything, but you can ask it questions just to make sure it's really giving you the message that you really want to send. So it can, do its calculations with every question that I ask it. And I've got binders and binders full of its analysis. The reason I bring that up is it's, and for what it's worth, I believe it would be awesome because it covers so much stuff and it's got so many amazing stories. I think people would really love it, like on Netflix. or Amazon Prime. I'm trying to figure out how to break into that. I've been writing so hard and so heavy for the last 2 years with this thing that I haven't really explored that too much, but the AI has looked at it and said, wow, I mean, this would make an incredible series. So I'm hoping someone will reach out and do that with me. But at the same time, I'll give this warning out to them. It has a message with it, and I would not, for any amount of money, give over the rights of this thing if they took away that message. So they'd have to keep that message, but I think it'd be a blockbuster. And according to AI, and its analysis, it would outdo anything that's out there right now, or anything that AI can find. And it can find pretty much everything. So yeah, no, I hope that does happen. And I'll look forward to talking to you again once that someone does reach out and make that offer.
Well, tell me a little bit about the future and the plans that you have going forward. Are you thinking about any more series? And you kind of had touched on this a little earlier, but what are some goals and future plans that you have for this series as well as for other books in the future?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I dabble with all the time is making trailers for it. Now with again AI, you can, put parts of the story in, or this chapter or that chapter, and it'll make you, a very quick video, which is kind of amazing and they'll make music and stuff for you too. So you can get a soundtrack, you can get the video, you can do all that for chapters, and once I get enough time, I can throw all those together to make hopefully my own movie, if you will. I'm hoping AI is going to give writers the ability to do that sometime near in the future, which sounds crazy, but the way it's been advancing, it's possible that there'll be software out there that'll actually, you'll be able to feed in stories to it, and it'll give you, screenplays, and then, video movies, which would be awesome, because then people, all the millions of people that have stories to tell, would be able to do that very easily through YouTube or whatever, and they wouldn't need to, wait for somebody like, Netflix or Amazon to come out or reach out to them, or there's probably one in a million people that have awesome stories like myself that actually get them to TV for people to see. So it does seem like we're becoming a video kind of culture. I would hope that, Mr. Bezos or any of those other guys that are in charge of all this stuff would realize the potential in doing that, um, and find a way to do that for people, because that would be truly awesome. So that's one direction I'm trying to go. Obviously, I have this next book that I've written out 100, basically 100 chapters for, just very briefly, that I have to finish, which again will change all this and make it even more awesome and tighten it up. Um, and so I'm working on that. And then, yeah, I mean, the future is the limit as far as another series goes. If I can find a way to break out of this universe, it's bigger than basically the Star Wars universe. It's bigger than the Lord of the Rings universe. And so that's why I would encourage people to actually look into it and give it a shot, because there's just so much in here. Uh, yeah, it's just been really fun. So Noah, it's hard to say. Been so busy with this series, and then trying to get it to video and again audio. It's on Kindle, and they have different apps like Speechify or whatever, where you can have like 1,000 different voices read anything that you've got digital for you. So, I'm trying to get it to Audible, which is a lot of work and it's a lot of money. So you either got to get someone to read it, or you just got to, with something this size, it would take probably a year for me to read it, to get it into Audible. But Kindle, you get this whole series for $30 now on Kindle. And like I said, you can get an app that can read in 1,000 different voices. So, Audible is awesome, but you can do it cheaply. You can get the same thing if you want to have a book that you want to read with all these different voices, and you can change them all the time. Honestly, this stuff all sounds better with a British person reading it. I do that on Speechify when I have it read my books, and it's awesome. So, a lot of different ways to go, a lot of different directions to go for me and all the authors out there, but those are the ones that I'm concentrating on right now.
Well, Terrence, I appreciate you so much for taking time to come on my podcast today to share more about your book. And I appreciate you for taking time out of your schedule to come on. So, if people are interested in learning more about your books, if they would like to follow you and support you on your journey, promote everything where people can go to learn more about your books, where they can purchase it, and where they can go to learn more about books in the future.
Sure, thank you. The name is Terrence Rotering, all E's, Terrence, and then Rotering, Rotering. And if you put that in Google or a search engine, it'll come up with the different places you can get the books, Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, all of those. Um, and it'll also show you my website, which is chroniclesoftrinian.com. That was the first trilogy, chroniclesoftrinian.com. And on there you have, links to awesome podcasts like this where I talk about the books. You got links to where you can get them, what they're about, the order, all that kind of stuff. So I look forward. And also you got email there. So if you want to ask me any questions about it, I can answer those or, any other questions you have. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you, Noah, for having me today and everybody else that's listening.
And I will put all these links in the description box in the show notes below. So feel free to check him out and everything. I'll put links in the show notes. So feel free to just go there to find all the links there. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at southern.reads. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And as always, go to the website noahspodcast.com to learn more about this show as well as the other podcasts that I do and find all the links to everything there. Feel free to also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, feel free to subscribe and follow so you get notified of when new episodes like this come out in the future. I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I will catch you all in the next episode of Southern Reads.